Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UnLearnT podcast. This is your host, Jaquita Ross, and we are here at the second act. This is the place where we reflect on where we've been so we can redefine our now and rewrite our next. Listen, friends, I have a treat for you today. I'm not even kidding when I say this. This is one of my favorite people, okay? She is my big sister, but more importantly, she is a servant of the Most High. She is a wife. She is a daughter. She is a pastor. Okay. And I can't wait to talk about her journey to getting there. Okay. This is none other than the pastor, Catina Parrish-Clark. Hi, Catina.
Hello there, my sweet Jaquita Rose. It
Oh
is
my goodness.
such an
Oh,
honor to be with you on this podcast. So looking forward to tonight.
y'all, let me tell you something. Tina's voice does something to me. I'm telling y'all, can't y'all hear the pastor? It drips off of
Oh
her. Her
Lord.
commitment to the caring and well-being of people is just so paramount. It spills over in her. And that's why I have always loved her, y'all. Katina and I, just as a backstory, we met in divinity school. Katina was there for some of my formative years. I was I was a
Formative for us
fresh
all.
baby. Yes, it was a fresh beginning for everyone. I don't know how many of y'all know about the trials and tribulations of divinity school, but I'm sure we'll talk about a few of those as well. But Katina immediately became my big sister. She is the one, if you're wondering why my Instagram handle is Quita Rose, because since I met her, Katina has called me Quita Rose or Jaquita Rose. And I thought it was the cutest thing. But Katina, tell them why you was calling me Jaquita Rose.
Well, the classes were so big at Van Den. Sometimes when the students would introduce themselves, you may not get all of what they were saying, but I could have sworn she told us that her name was Jaquita Rose, and that was her first name, but she was really giving her first and last name Jaquita Ross. And so I just called her Jaquita Rose from day one all the way until here we are in 2025, 13 years later. So I like it. She likes it. It sticks.
Yes, y'all, she thought Jaquita Rose was my real name. And now I have adopted it. And now I love it. I put little roses at the end of my signatures. So I absolutely love it, y'all. Katina, and I just want to say this. Okay, I don't know who's in the office now. Okay, but I was Katina's first armor bearer. Okay, I used to travel with Katina from church to church as she preached the good news, and I'd be in
You
that
did.
back room praying my sister on through. So it's been a
You
wonderful
did.
journey with Katina. I can't
Oh,
wait for you guys to hear more about her life and her journey and her story because truly it is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
thank you. So kind. So kind.
Yes. All right. So, friends, we're still in our first season of the second act. So, I'm just going to run down how we're going to roll through this conversation, right? We are going to start off talking about the first act. The first act are those formative years. It's where God is showing you a little bit about who you are, what's inside of you. It's where you are experiencing maybe some different situations, some conflicts, right? That will get resolved as you continue to walk through your journey, right? And Katina, you didn't start off as a pastor, right? You did not start off as a pastor, and just as a note for the people who are wondering, Pastor, where she's the pastor at? Katina is the associate pastor of congregational care at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee. It's also the church I attended when I was at Vandy. We went to Vanderbilt Divinity School together. And so Katina has such a beautiful journey there. So, Katina, I want to hear more. I want the people to hear more about where we started before we got ideas of pastoring, right? And even if you can start, like, what led you to divinity school?
Yeah. So I would have to start all the way back from really, I think, was probably my most formative year that I knew of at that particular time, just spiritually. It was a time when I first started being able to discern the voice of God. And I was working at my first job outside of college. And I was doing insurance. I was not an insurance agent, but I processed life and long term care insurance
Really?
claims. I did,
I
yeah, for
never
the
knew that.
honey. I don't know what happened, but applied. It was the first job I applied for out of college, got the job, and it stuck, right? And
Wow.
so a lot of us who had graduated from MTSU had applied at this particular life insurance company. And we were working there, and I had worked there for about 5 years, the number of
Mm.
grace, right?
Yeah.
And some things started to shift at the insurance company because one of the things about that job that we had, of course, when you get out of college, you think, I'm going to climb this career ladder because that's what we've all been taught, as we
Yeah.
were talking about what the path looks like or and the trajectory looks like after college. And so, of course, we had our regular salaries, but there was so much overtime available at this life insurance company
Listen,
that
get the money.
we were staying, honey, until 7 and 8 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
and,
And
just
when
having
you're
these
younger, you
fat
do that.
checks.
Yeah.
Honey, yes, honey, you
Yeah.
just order pizza, eat pizza in, and then, honey, you're ready to shower and go to bed and get ready for the next day. But, something was happening within insurance at that particular time, and it was about 2001, and,
Mm.
they had called us in for some meetings to say that, they were putting a cap on the salaries. And I was like, now, God, this is not what I signed up for. Now I done went to school and, I'm looking to climb this career ladder.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, when they had put a cap on the salaries, they had also instituted, which did not make any sense. I mean, looking back on it now, you would know that it's nothing but God, because
Yeah.
as they were putting a cap on the salaries, they also had put in place a tuition reimbursement program.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, well, let me just see about going back to school, maybe. And so, of course, I didn't know what I was going to go back to school for. But again, this was the time where I was really being developed spiritually and I was being able to hear the voice of God. And so, the church that I was currently in, I had kind of already been serving in ministry there and, singing in the choir, but also participating as one of the facilitators for children's church. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world,
Oh, Catina,
red and
our
yellow, black and
baby
white.
loved you.
Yes. And so, honey,
Yes.
I would teach children's church right there there was a segment right there within the service. And so people had seen me do that for years. And so a lot of times people would come up and say, "Where did you teach school? I really want to try to get my kids in your class." And I was like, "I'm not a teacher. I process life insurance claims and long term care insurance claims." But people kept speaking this over my life. So I
Wow.
would have to say my first calling that I received from God was my calling to teach.
Wow.
As that salary cap was happening at the insurance company in which I was
Wait.
currently employed, I went back to school, got my master's, and before I left the job, I ended up getting my master's from TSU in education and supervision because I was like, "Well, Lord, if I'm going to teach, then I am going to have to, be on the other salary scale. I'm not going to be able to
Put
go in
me
on the
put me up on the
introductory."
bracket. Take me on up.
Right, right.
Not no introductory.
No, no, no.
Uh-uh.
I said, Lord, I'm gonna have to be an administrator. And of course, you don't go in as an administrator. You have to, start in the classroom.
Yeah.
But I taught for 7 years. And again, the number of completion, right? And
Ooh.
so in that season, God showed me a lot. I mean, to the point where I could hear God's voice so clearly to at one point it kind of got a little bit scary. And I told God, I was like, hey, okay, I know you're God. But the next time I ask you something, you don't have to say it so loudly, because God was just showing me really in that moment
Yeah.
that the things that I'm calling you to, I'm going to give you very clear instruction. I'm going to give you very clear direction. You're not going to have to question it at all. I'm going to speak it so loudly to you that it's going to be undeniable. And so, those 7 years, that calling to teach, um, the kids were my congregants.
Come on here. Here.
My podium inside the classroom was my pulpit.
Come on here. That's
And
what I try to
so
tell people. You looking for it to happen one way, but God
mm-mm.
will set you up, and any place can become a place of purpose.
Absolutely, absolutely, and of course, hindsight is always 20/20, right? Because, in that 7th year of teaching, that's when I also experienced my calling to preach. So, that starts then the pivot,
Okay,
right?
wait, because there's some nuggets that I don't want to lose because I feel like we're
Okay,
about to shift to the next
okay.
part of your story. But the way, you were saying that you were learning God's voice
Mhm,
as you were kind of moving through these different shifts and pivots of your life, right? And I think what's so important, because people ask me all the time, how can I hear the voice of God? What do I do, or what's the secret sauce? But it was in his move. God was speaking through the moves. When they put a cap on the salary, right? But that shifted you, right, into moving towards something else, because God, one river draw dried up, right, but he shifted you to another brook that was overflowing with the tuition reimbursement, right? So he didn't actually take anything away from you. He shifted you, and that was his speaking. And then when you went through that process and got your degree, then you moved from insurance to education. That was him speaking. And so a lot of times we're waiting to hear, but what God really wants us to do is to pay attention, right?
yeah,
And to not allow our emotions, because you could have been in your feelings. Salary cap,
in my feelings, yeah.
salary cap. Oh Lord, the
And
world is
never
ending.
and never wanted to teach, because, and not that teaching, forsake not that office at all, but
Yeah,
I think that, across the nation, across this globe, we know that teachers are, grossly underpaid
my
for
Lord.
the level of work that they do, and so that was certainly not, the path that I wanted to take. I was like, "No, Lord, now wait a minute. I can't go backwards here. You know how much I made, even
You,
if it was including overtime. I
yeah,
have got to make more here." And
yeah.
so, you're right. That was one of the seasons where I was like, "No, God, if this is clearly you, I need for it to look like this." And I guess God was saying, I know that teaching is not the path that you would have chosen, but you've got to trust that if you're obedient to me and you choose the path that I am giving unto you, I'm going to
Wow.
provide for you and make room for you to have what you stand in need of.
But I think another thing is that a lot of times we think that what we're chasing after is what God is putting in front of us to pursue. But what God was actually perfecting was your yes. That entire time he was putting you in different spaces, and in front of different people, and in front of different assignments, but really he was perfecting your yes, right? Your
Mhm.
trust me when you can't see, trust me when you don't know, trust me when it looks like something dried up, still say yes. And so I love that yes led you to accept a call. That,
Yeah.
by the way, just as a note, when Catina and I met, she had her yes, I had not yet found mine, and she's part of the reason that I was forced into my yes, okay? But go ahead, talk about your yes, Katina.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to hear the voice of God because I
Yeah,
guess, when I think about just my life's journey, from the time when I felt like I could first start hearing from God. Hearing from God is confirming, but it's
yeah.
not always comfortable. So the thing about it
Tag it,
is,
tag that right there, y'all.
yeah, I mean, seriously, if you're gonna clock some tea, clock that.
Yeah,
Because as much as you say, okay, well, God, I know because you are God, it's your voice that's speaking to me. I know you're not going to tell me anything wrong, but God, I don't understand this. It
yeah,
don't look right. It don't always feel right. And sometimes, it gets very uncomfortable on the path of obedience, but
yeah,
God continues to show himself faithful. And so even in that time where God was really uh, training my ear to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, he was also training my yes, because once you say yes to God, it's not just one yes. Your yes just continues to unfold. It continues to get bigger. It continues to get bigger. It continues to get
Hold
greater.
on, wait a minute,
Uh,
because I ain't bring no
yeah,
Kleenex today,
I
Katina, now.
promise you that yes, the cost of discipleship is great. The
Yeah.
cost of discipleship is great. And so,
Yeah.
but it's nothing that you cannot afford, because God has deposited himself inside of you. And God has always promised unto us that
Katina,
he
don't
will supply
come on here.
all of our needs
Hold on.
according to his riches and glory, even when it doesn't look like it's anything that's tangible. If it's not, just because it's not money, God will supply everything that you stand in need of, even after you have said yes unto him, to continue to trust him. God will supply even that.
Katina. The cost is great, but you can afford it because of who's been deposited in you.
Yeah,
Did you just preach that? When
I
you
did not, but I might have to.
Man, I might have to too, y'all. I give you a little credit. Ooh, that was so
Go
good.
ahead. Go ahead.
Because, I think a lot of times there's a lot of people who are, ambitious, or they have great vision, or they have great insight into who they are and what they're called to do, and we chase after these things. But when you try to do things off your strength is going to come up short. Me, by myself, I can't afford what God has called me to. I will get spent. I will get I will empty myself and still have more to do if I count on my own strength. But if you tap into what's been deposited in you, you'll have enough to give out to everything that God has called you to do. Because what I'm learning, right? We on this podcast we talk a lot about being middle adults. Okay, because this middle adulting, okay, nobody prepared us for. Everybody was preparing you how to be a young adult and telling you to look forward to like retirement. Nobody taught you how to do the in
The
between.
in
The
between.
in
Yeah.
between these middle adult years, I'm trying to tell you. But I think about my life right now, and it's been like a circle. It's been getting wider, right? And so there's more responsibilities, there's more priorities, there's more things that require something of me. And when I depend on my own strength, that's when feelings of overwhelm come. That's when feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression, feelings of being unsure, insecure, those are going to come anyway, but you become overcome by it
Yeah.
because you get depleted. You have to depend on something that's greater than you in order to be able to put out everything that's being required of you in these different seasons.
Yeah, you are so right. That's one of the things that, I have to keep before myself, even as I operate in this space, because the job that I have, rarely does anything good come to my office. And when I say good, I mean they're not calling me for joyous moments. They're not calling me for
Yeah.
joyous occasions. I was able to do a wedding just a couple of weeks ago, but
Ooh,
weddings come far and few in between. I'm doing more funerals and hospital visits and things of that
wow.
sort. And
Yeah.
so, you find yourself busying yourself doing the work of ministry, and then that's who you become. And you have to remember that you're not a human doing, you are a human being.
Tell
And
them.
so you have to make sure, as you pour out to God's people, you cannot do God's work without first being before Him, because He's a fountain that will never run dry. You have
Yeah.
to make sure that you load up and that you fuel up, so that you can be ready for the work that God has assigned to you. And yes, never ever will I can say this for me. If there's anything that becomes problematic for me, I probably don't give myself enough credit, but I'm always one who's going to always recognize that low is the way. I
Ooh,
trust that God is my supplier. I trust that
my
because God
Lord.
has planted my feet on the path in which He would have for me to go, I am trusting fully for him to stamp his super on my natural. There's no way that I can
Lord
do
have
this or that
mercy.
I can get ahead of myself and, try to take any glory from any of this because, and I see that a lot on these platforms, these, star stages and status is what we call it. A
My
girlfriend of
Lord.
mine and I, because people are seeking that. And
Yeah.
never ever am I seeking, if there's an opportunity for me to not sit on the pulpit, I'm always running for that opportunity versus for me to sit on the pulpit. Let me sit and act like I'm a worshiper. I know I'm a
Yeah.
leader and I know that the pulpit comes along with the job. And I know that I have to mount that pulpit at some point or another. But I would rather sit in the audience as a worshiper because I never want to forsake my worship for my work.
All right, Katina. You gonna mess us up. Back to the first act. Okay, all right. We were teaching, we were discerning the voice of God,
Yeah.
and you had made a move, and you made another move, and then what led you from God feeling that call, right? And
Mhm.
and knowing that it was God, what came next? Like what informed how you moved from being in a really comfortable space to again going to an uncomfortable one? Because divinity
Let
school was
me
uncomfortable. I just want y'all to know.
Divinity school was uncomfortable, but even, what preceded divinity school and its discomfort was when I received the calling to preach in my 7th year of teaching.
Wow.
That calling to preach was also a calling away from my church and to
Ooh.
Mount Zion.
Yeah.
Now that calling was yeah, I did not understand it.
Yeah.
First of all, I had to bear the weight of, God confirming for sure that he was
Yeah.
really calling me into ministry. And that's a heavy weight
Yeah.
to bear within itself because you're like, God, who am I?
Yeah.
To be able to be entrusted with such a beautiful work as this, but a heavy work
Yeah.
and to be able to represent you. God, I have a history. I haven't always been who I am today. I know, God, that you have, smoothed out some rough edges and that you've, washed some things clean. But God,
Won't he wash you and make you new?
baby, purge you with
Won't he?
hyssop. Do you
Yeah.
hear me?
Come on
Baby, your
here.
sins were like scarlet, but you will be as white as snow.
White as
And
snow. Come on
so you
here.
hear me? I promise
Yeah.
you. Yes. But that season for me was probably one of the most difficult seasons of my life because again, I could not really wrap my mind around what all this calling meant. But for you to now call me away from the church where my faith was developed, where I had people
Wow.
who loved me. I could get the keys to the church. I always had very good
Yeah.
relationships with, I had only had two pastors at the time. The pastor, of course, that first introduced me to God, and then he passed away, and then the pastor who took his place. So I had very
Yeah.
good relationships at that church, and so
My
God,
Lord.
how can you call me to preach the gospel, but pull me away from the church. The people again who had, watched me in my formative years grow up. These people have supported me. I need their support now more than ever. But then, God was saying to me, if you're spiritually dying in this place, how are you going to preach my word to people and you have
Wow.
nothing inside of you to give unto them? So
Yeah.
yes, I am calling you to this, but I'm calling you away from that. And
Wow.
so it was I promise you it was a fight. Me and God, we wrestled like Jacob,
Ooh-wee. I bet
with
you
that
did.
one. We
Yeah.
did, because not only was I, again taking on this new calling to ministry, but moving, and I knew he wanted me to go to Mount Zion, right?
Yeah.
And I did not want to go to Mount Zion. It was this huge church, all these people, and again, I had been, I don't want to say the center of attention at my church. That is not what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
people knew me.
Well
People loved
known,
me.
rooted,
Yeah.
established.
I
Yeah.
mean, I had grown up in that church. And
Yeah.
so the people respected me there and they trusted the leadership that I already had. Now you're going to take me to this foreign place I'm new to
Yeah.
ministry. Nobody knows me. So I'm trying to figure out this new path. Don't you think, God, that that would be much easier for me to figure that out amongst people who are already, on my side? I have nobody over here to cheer for me. So that
Yeah.
was, yeah, that was the
But
one of the biggest pivots.
it's such a Abraham moment. It's such a, yes, they did know you, but would they have been able to sustain and uphold who God was calling you to become? And not that there's anything wrong. I love giving honor to the places that formed me,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
built
yeah.
me, and I carry them with me everywhere I go. There's no dishonor in that,
Mm-mm.
but it is I know that for where God is calling me and what he is intending to pull out of me, that there are places that I have to go and get connected to. Again, it is, and this was again you learning the voice of God, because in one season he dried the brook up, right? It was, hey, they literally said, we're putting a cap on the salaries, right? So that was a clear indication. But as you were growing with God, now he's speaking and he's saying, it may not look like it's dry, but you are going to have to operate in obedience now,
Yeah.
right? Like, you're going to have to move because I told you to, and not because the circumstances are pushing you out.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
as we are moving and walking with God, especially in this first act, where we're, like you said, learning to hear him, we're learning who we are, we're learning what's really inside of us. And I love the journey that God took you on, where, you are always kind of in this care role, right? Like with insurance, that's a very, like, taking care of people, taking care of their properties and their homes, and then moving into this teaching space where it's more direct care. And now you're learning how to have congregants, and you're learning how to give messages daily.
In preparation, yeah. I
Yes.
mean, it was, it was when I look back on it, it was preparation for because ministry never stops. Like a teacher's
Yeah.
job, they never stop. They just have to, cut it off, when they've had enough because you never stop caring, you never stop pouring into the ones that God has entrusted into your care.
Yes.
So, yes, it was definitely a moment where God was forming me and shaping me for where I am now. But one of the things, as I even listened, that I don't think I ever really gave thought to is in that first season where God was drying up the brook and He was giving me another job to go to. That next pivot, God was had matured me to the place of me giving up a job to go back
Wow.
to school, right? Because
Wow. Yeah.
once God was calling me to ministry, I had no idea other than I knew God wanted me to preach. That was
Hmm.
the only thing I knew. I didn't know much
Which
more about any
I
other
just want to
callings.
clarify for the saints. Preacher, pastor, different. Okay, when she knew God was calling her to preach, we weren't necessarily thinking time for me to go lead congregational nothing,
No,
you know.
we'll get to that in a minute because I promise
I
you,
just no, because the
pastor
people need
was
to know
nowhere. It was nowhere on my what are these things that the people make?
the vision board.
These vision boards. It was nowhere on it. Matter of fact, I had burned it off. If anybody else had put it on there, I was like, that is not my and I told God. And this is how God says, you know what? You can say whatever you want to say to me. I'm God, I'm your father. You don't tell me what to do. I'm
Let
telling
me
you
tell you
what to
something.
do.
Who's the parent, who the child?
Baby, you hear me? And you better get back in the child's place. But
You
I
better
told
get back in
God,
the child's place.
when I said, God, I'm going to tell you yes, because I know that if I do not say yes at this point, this is complete disobedience. This is not delayed obedience at this point. You have confirmed to me that I'm supposed to be your hands and feet in the earth, and I'm supposed to
Yeah,
be your woman of God and to be able to carry out your word unto your people.
yeah,
But God, I wasn't feeling it at the particular time, but I said, God, I will say yes to you as long as you never ever ask me to pastor. And
yeah.
that's
We
what
be
I told
trying it.
God.
We be
Yep,
trying it. I'm
yep.
telling you, when I had not yet received the call, because remember when you met me, I was still denying that there was any call.
You were the only one that was denied.
It doesn't matter. But when I was in undergrad and I heard the Lord tell me that I had to change my major to religion, I remember I was so emotional. I walked out, got my keys, went to my car. I was driving around campus. I drove to the chapel and I cried and said, Lord, I don't want to be a pastor. Okay, now he ain't caught me like he caught you, but I'm just resonating with the fact that, like, for those of us who have been called, I feel like there's a lot, there's a lot of us who said, just so you know, Lord, I want to put this out here.
I want to put this out here, and
Yeah.
I know God hears everything that we say, but the way that God brings things about, it does make it easier for us to say yes, because once you have said yes to Him and you've cried out to Him in the middle of your yes, because even once you tell God yes, it's still not going to always be easy. The climb is not always comfortable. You get out in the middle of the water and you're like, Lord, you have called me out on the face of the deep, and I heard you, and I was trusting you from point A to right, like point L. But
My
God, right
Lord.
here at point R,
Let me tell you something.
this is not, I believe I'm getting ready to start sinking, but God continues to not just stretch your faith, but God continues to strengthen your faith along the way so
Yeah.
that you trust Him all the more. Because God is going to call you even from that place, that deep place, to another place of elevation that's going to require even more trust from
Oh,
Him.
we.
And so you have to continue, because it may not be that even in that place of elevation where He's calling you to at that particular time, that you're just like, okay, God, yeah, 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 I'm ready for this. But because God has shown you who he is and who He will be, even along the way, it's easier for you to trust God. God, I don't know what in the world you are leading me into now,
Mm,
but God, I trust you. You've
yeah.
shown yourself faithful to me so many times that, God, I have no choice now, God, but to say yes to you again, and knowing that even, as you hash out these details, that you're still going to be faithful unto me.
Yeah. Oh, we, Catina, that's so good. That's so good. Okay, so you're trusting God. I love just your journey of discovery. And I think it's just such a testament that
Yeah.
a lot of the times the questions we have about, who we are and what our purpose is and what has God called me to, it is found on the journey of obedience. It
Yeah.
is found on the journey of yes. And a lot of times the things that we're asking God for, we haven't seen yet because there's an area in our life where we forsook that yes. But if you find your yes, you'll find your next place, your next step. And so I love how your journey is unfolding thus far. So I'm guessing we're still in the first act. What happens? What happens next? I wish I had me a little
Well,
popcorn. This
Well,
is good.
this, it's good now. I thank God that, I've been able to just be on the front row and watch this, because I promise you, my faith has been developed. There's nothing that I will not trust God to do,
Wow.
in my life now, because I have watched God work. God has almost said, watch and see. Yeah. When you do this, watch me do this. And
My
so
Lord.
the path of obedience for me has proven to be the path of blessing. And so once I left teaching, I was like, okay, God, I mean, I didn't have a job at all. I
Mhm.
didn't have a job at all, but I was
Oh,
like, I
wow.
cannot commit to the school where I was teaching again for another year, because I was like, I don't want them to start the year off. I was more concerned with, how they were going to start their year off than what was going to be next for me. And so
Wow.
I did not want to start a year with them and then have to leave, because I was like, I know God is calling me to ministry. Like, I cannot deny this anymore. So
Yeah.
once I left teaching, went to Mount Zion, joined their MIT Ministers in Training program, and I was in that program for, I want to say, a year. And then I had met one of the guys who was a member of the church. We both already knew each other, and we had just kind of served in ministry alongside each other in like Christian education or whatever.
Mhm.
But we both started MIT together.
Oh, wow.
And yes, he was so crazy. It was this guy, Lord, I'm forgetting his name, not really important, but we both started MIT together, and his wife was always a great support to the both of us because she knew that we were both scared, but we were certain that we were called. And so, right, he told me in that first year at the close of that first year of MIT that he was going to apply to Vandy. And I said, well, you know what? Rob was his name. Rob was his name. I said, well, Rob, you know what? I said, I'll help you with your paperwork. I said, but
Wow.
I'm not applying to Vandy. MIT is good. It's working for me. And I was like, Vandy, gosh, that is, awesome. And he applied. The 3 days before the application process was going to close, God spoke to me one night and God said, I'm speaking. Are you listening?
Ooh.
And I got a phone call that said, Catina, I just have one question for you. I'm sitting here working on Rob's application. I'm wondering why I'm not working on your application. And I just went to tears. And that weekend, it took me 3 days, as long as it took Jesus to get up out of that grave. Now, he been working on his stuff for 6 months because it was a whole packet. Well,
Yeah.
And so 3 days I worked on my application and all the stuff that I was supposed to submit. I submitted it. I got into Vandy. He did not.
Because I
So
was
he
about to say,
was
I don't
just,
remember Rob.
he was not with us. He was just
But
my
his
catalyst.
whole purpose was
He was my
wow.
catalyst to get me into
Wow.
Vanderbilt, for me to get there. And again, another yes to God, because I promise you, I thought for sure, I was like, God, you are leading me out here to make a complete fool out of me. I can't hardly spell Vanderbilt. And you want me to do what? You want me to go to Vanderbilt Divinity School?
Ooh,
Mm-mm.
ooh.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Katina. Wow.
Yeah.
Again, it's funny. I have a similar, the Lord just, if you go to Vandy, if you went to Vanderbilt Divinity School, the Lord called you there and he meant what he said. Do you hear me? It is something about that school. When I became a religion major, because the Lord told me to. And then I had no idea what I was going to do next. But I asked my professors, I was starting to get interested. I said, hey, what do people with religion majors do next? And they were like, they go to seminary. And I said, where did y'all go? They said, we went to Vanderbilt. I said, okay, y'all gonna do some reference letters? What y'all gonna do? And they wrote me reference letters. And I put my application into Vandy and I was like, let me have a backup plan because, I don't know. And so I tried to put in an application to do. I tried no less than 4 or 5 times. Every time I went to go to see my Duke application, because it takes a long time to fill those applications out, it would be completely erased, blank, like I had never
Yeah.
started. I would hit the save button 5 million times. I would go back that day and check. It would still be there. The next day, gone. And the
God
Lord would tell
speaking.
me, I
God
said
saying no.
Vanderbilt.
No. Vanderbilt. Yeah.
When I got there, I said, you said what? This? This is what you said? Lord, I am confused.
Yeah.
Right. But
As much as I wanted to hear from Vandy for them to say yes, because I was like, that meant, that was something that I could be proud of. I also wanted them to say no, because I was like, I won't have to
that ain't
go
the
through
way the
with this.
Lord want me to go.
I said, God, really? Okay. By the time I had gotten through all those tears, I think I told God one evening, I was like, okay, God, you know what? I figured it out. Because I'm wise, right? I know God. I know how God's gonna work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was in my driveway and I said, God, okay, I figured it out. You didn't really want me to go to Vanderbilt. You were just testing my obedience
Oh,
to
that's
see if
cute.
I was gonna follow what you asked me to do. So it's fine. Let them send the no paperwork. I'll stay at MIT and we'll work this thing
Oh,
out the
that
way
was
that we
cute.
had planned
That was real
originally.
cute.
And honey, I got that letter in the mailbox and I was like, Lord, now I got to go.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah. And
Lord have
and the
mercy.
other thing, with that, of course, like I do, it was a full-time program.
Yeah.
And so, I
We
was
were
saying,
not
Lord,
part-time. We were in that
I
thing.
was a full adult, God,
Yeah.
with
Let me
real
tell y'all
adult
something.
bills.
Katina was in our close to middle adult years when we were in, and she did not fool around with us. We be
Mhm.
like, y'all, we gotta stay up all night, and we
They
not
doing
sleeping tonight.
papers 5 and
8 p.m.
10 minutes before class. My paper been done since last week.
Let me tell
I
you
wasn't
something,
fooling with these children.
Katina was leaving us around about 7 o'clock. Katina be like, "All right, babies, I got to go." We be like, "Katina, I'm done with mine," and we be like,
Mhm.
"How she do that?"
That's
That's
right.
that middle adult. We ain't got time to be wasted. We ain't got
Nope.
time to be
Mm-mm.
lollygagging around. I got
No, I
things
was
to do.
37, had already been out here adulting for a little bit, and then started divinity school. I was like, no, God, you have really, really done your big one this time, because now you're saying, okay, I gave you a job, you gave up a job. Now you get ready to go back to school and volunteer for poverty.
Let me tell you something. Them divinity school years, that was the only time in my life that they put that little pink slip on my apartment door. And I was like, y'all, I'm waiting on the refund check. Okay. Let me tell you something. We used to be calling each other, text, hey, did your refund check come through yet? Where the refund check at? Because we
Yeah,
literally were living off of that.
yeah, living off of the leftovers.
Living, girl, wait a minute. Y'all, Katina gonna preach about 5, 6 sermons before we done. Because living off of the leftovers, I see people scribbling that down right now. They about to take that to the pulpit this Sunday, okay?
Yeah.
Because that is good. Katina, what divinity school? What were maybe like top 5 takeaways from your time there?
Oh gosh, top 5 takeaways. I have to still, one, I will say, I have to still give all the glory to God, because one of the things I think, it may not have been taught specifically in the classroom, because you don't get a lot of Jesus when you go to divinity school. Now, had I
No,
known
no, no,
that,
no, no. We need to pause. We need to
there,
pause. We need to pause because
yeah,
I remember people saying, "I'm coming to divinity school to find God," and we were like, this ain't the place.
no,
This ain't
no.
it. No,
I
no, no,
had
no."
no experience. I do
Yeah,
have another pastor in my family, of course, on my paternal side, but still, just right in my maternal siblings that I was raised with, I didn't have a lot of experience with ministry and what that would look
yeah.
like. And so I had no idea that divinity school was quite different than
Church.
you know, yes, it looked nothing like. I'm thinking I done grew up in the church. All I know is Jesus. I'm getting ready to get a better understanding of Jesus when I get over here. But one of the things, that I feel like, God continued to show me is just try me.
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't get that, out of any of the classes that we attended at Vanderbilt. But if you just try me, I will prove myself unto you over and over again. I
Yeah.
think one of the other things, too, that was really transformative for me, because I had a lot of faith, entering into divinity school, and I had a pretty good understanding of my faith. But I think one of the things that was very critical for me was that constructive theology class
She loved
uh,
that class,
that
y'all.
we had. That was by far my favorite.
She loved that
Because
class.
yeah, you have faith, but do you know how to really explain your faith? And so
Yeah.
by the time that constructive really destructed all of what you thought that you knew and what you thought that you believed, and you
Listen.
had to build back up on that foundation that they
Ooh,
had
we.
they got you down to ground zero.
Yeah.
You had to start explaining like what soteriology looks like,
Oh my
and
goodness. Pneumatology. That's my
anthropology,
favorite word that
pneumatology,
I got
all
from
these things.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anthropomorphism of God, all of
Come
those
on
things.
here. Come
I
on
love.
here.
Now that was a good class, honey. That
Yeah.
was a good class. So, yeah,
I always tell people that Vanderbilt, you don't go to Vanderbilt to get faith. But it did teach me how to articulate my faith. Right.
articulated
And
for
it
sure.
deepened, because when I got there, I was like, I believe because I believe. I
Hmm.
don't need reasons to believe. I don't have, an
Hmm.
analytical argument for why I believe. I believe because I believe. But Vanderbilt really did force me to be able to pull out,
To defend
to defend
your
it,
faith.
right? And to
Mhm.
become a when we talk about being a mouthpiece of God, right? It gave me the foundation to say, I know what God sounds like, not just because of my personal experience, but because I know the foundation of the word in order to really give it. Now, it did not teach me the word. I just want to be clear. Now, we
Yeah.
took a little New Testament class and a little Hebrew Bible
I
class.
was afraid that that was going to come up on this podcast.
Let me tell y'all something. One of the most traumatizing experiences of my life happened in New Testament, and Catina was there to see it, honey. You talk about a master student's nightmare. It's finals, all right, and I am fast asleep on the couch. The sun has now woken me up. I look at my phone, and the final is almost over. Okay, it is like 9:30, and the final started at 8. I'm driving across town. I walk in, everybody's in the hallway. They've already finished taking their final exam. And I bust into tears. And I went to probably the hardest professor we had at Vanderbilt, Dr. A.J. Levine, who is a Jewish woman who can teach the New
Baby, she
Testament backwards and forwards.
She know more about Jesus than Mary.
Please. But no,
I'm
but for
so
real. But for
serious.
real. But for real. And I bust into tears, and that woman showed me so much grace. And there wasn't a lot of grace that semester. But that day I got grace to take that
No.
test and get my
Baby, if
B
you
and move on
never
about my life.
experienced grace, you experience. And we were in there. You didn't know this, but we were in there dragging out our tests to just see. Okay, is she gonna come in? Let's write these answers a little bit slower because surely Jaquit. Because we had called you, we had done everything that we could
Oh
do
my
other than send a smoke signal to see where you were. But
oh, I so
those
appreciate God
were,
for
oh
that.
my gosh, those were some years that you will never ever, they were not easy, you know. But God continued to prove to us over and over again that
Over and
because He
over.
had called us to that place, that He was going to see us fully through to the end, and we crossed the finish line. You know, the thing about being there, though, it is very formative still, and we're always growing, we're always developing. God never takes His hand off of us. We've never, arrived in God. God is always taking us from
Yeah,
glory to glory. And in those
absolutely.
spaces, as we were there, I don't think that, a majority of us really knew exactly what our path was going to be afterwards.
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, I had no idea that God was calling me to anything but to preach. But it was there in that space that I fell in love with chaplaincy because I did a field
Oh,
education
really?
course in chaplaincy, and I
Yeah.
mean, I fell in love with chaplaincy
When I tell
in
you,
6 weeks.
let me tell y'all something. Katina chaplaincy oozes out of her pores. Do you hear
Mm.
me? I remember distinctly one of my favorite memories of Katina. We used to have to park in a parking garage and then walk over to the divinity school. We had to cross the street, which I had never done before. I went to a very small, liberal arts college, and I got to bed, but I
Mhm.
was like, parking garage, this is new. But I remember I was parking next to Katina. I looked over in the car, and Katina was deep in prayer. I mean, deep. And she got out the car. I said, Katina, you was praying for the saints? She said, I'm always lifting up the saints. And I found that to be very true. One, but when Katina found chaplaincy, it was like hand in glove. It was such a perfect fit, and I think when God calls you to something, or when God starts pulling something out of you that you've never seen before, so God tells you, I'm calling you to preach. But then on that journey to preaching, you found chaplaincy, which is care, which is, covering people in their hardest, toughest moments. Like, I'm sure that answer, that gave you a sense of the why, right? Because God gave you the what. He said ministry, preaching, right? But the why became care, chaplaincy, covering the saints, and I think that's so beautiful how, because again, this journey of obedience in your first act, it really carried you through. We didn't see pastor then. We didn't see I'm going to be standing on one of the biggest pulpits in Tennessee, day after day, but we saw development there. And so I think there's a lot of people who know that there's greatness on the inside of you, but you have to be willing to take these steps in the development process and
Mhm.
saying the small yeses before anybody sees your big one.
Absolutely, absolutely. I still never thought that I would be where I am today. Chaplaincy was good for me. I loved it because one of the things, you know, for me as I operate in ministry is I never want to be away from God's people. I always want to be connected to the people. People again who operate in ministry are looking to pull away from the people, which is why God called us to ministry anyway, right? To meet the needs of the people. And so I'm always wanting to be boots on the ground with the people. And so as much as elevation sometimes kind of separates you from that. I find myself always not wanting to disconnect from that space. The
Yeah.
pulpit is fine. I love preaching God's word, but one thing about it, I want to be ambidextrous there because
Yeah.
um, I have nothing to preach about unless I've been with the people.
Catina, that's good.
I'm so serious.
Yeah.
When you have spent time with the people of God, it just the word of God, of course, it's rich enough by itself.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but when you have walked it out with people and you have seen the word of God be what the people need, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. The Lord
Yeah.
saves those who are crushed in spirit. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the
Joy
morning.
comes.
When you
Yeah.
have walked that out with people, that makes whatever you get ready to say or what you attempt to say on that pulpit, because see, you have a greater revelation of it now. And so I don't understand how people want to mount that pulpit and forsake God's people because you don't have a platform to stand on unless you have been with God and been with the people of God to be able to get up there on that pulpit and have anything to now say to the people who you have not been with.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Absolutely
Ooh.
not. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I kind of find myself, warring with. Yes, accepting all of the elevation that God wants because promotion does come directly from Him. But God, how can I maintain my connection and my connectivity to His people? And also accept the level of elevation that you would have me to accept at the same time.
Well, I love that. I love that. Again, I love the way that your story is unfolding, right? So as we're thinking about how we move through the different acts of our lives, we have
Hmm.
the first act, which I think you've done just a beautiful job of just walking us through your journey. But then there comes a time where we really feel like God has pulled us backstage, right? It's the intermission, right? For the people, the lights have gone back up. The people are not paying attention to what's happening on stage because the actors have now gone backstage to do costume changes, to change their makeup because they're preparing for what is to come, right? So as you thought about how God has moved you through these formative years, what do you identify as the moment where God kind of brought you backstage to really do a significant pivot in?
I think, Jaquita, as when I think about my journey, I really think that backstage moment really was the transition from teaching to experiencing that call to preach. I think that was the intermission for me because it was the place where, God was allowing me to really understand in that particular season that, even though I am allowing you to climb in this space, this climb is not going to be comfortable. And
Yeah,
so behind the scenes then is when God was kind of teaching me about, like you said, just that Abrahamic experience, leaving all of the things that were comfortable and familiar behind,
yeah,
and moving towards a place of transition in Him, and a transition that was going to require me to trust Him like never before. So, if I had to count a season to be that place that was the intermission in my life where God was taking me through this change for me to come back out and then say, Okay, I'm back again,
Yeah.
and now ready to move forward with the next act. I believe it was that, and I believe that act 2 was the piece really of me going,
Which
to
is ministry.
Vandy. Mhm, well,
Oh,
to Vandy, period,
yeah.
because God had to prepare me in the classroom to even say yes to the call to ministry. But that call to ministry again required me to leave the church and then come to the church that where nobody knew me. And
Yeah.
then Act Two, I believe, was me then going to Vandy and then allowing that Vandy experience to reveal unto me what was going to be next, in life for me, the role of chaplaincy, and then moving from that role of chaplaincy to even relocating
Yeah.
to Chattanooga to
Chattanooga,
take on
which is
that position.
beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it is one of the
Chattanooga is
most
so beautiful.
beautiful, sweet, quaint places. And you talk about trusting God again, because I never thought that I never really gave much thought to relocating. But again, God was calling me again away from everything that was familiar. But when I look back on it now, moving into that place of being a director of pastoral care in Chattanooga, again, uh, they had made me the lead chaplain at the hospital where I was serving here in Nashville, which was a community hospital. It was a nice size, but it was one hospital with four or five floors.
Yeah.
And so it was as much as, I think I had said early on, and as we got started, that I told God I would say yes if you never called me to be a pastor. One of the things in the hospital, as I was, taking care of the patients in the bed, but I had to learn in that space that my patients weren't always in the bed, that my staff
Mm,
were also,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
my patients. Because
Yeah.
again, if you don't take care of the people who take care of the people, then the people won't get taken care of. And so the staff comes to work with issues, from their home life, their own spiritual walk with God, but also as they are caring for patients and they're dying. And they're having to deal with death and dying on the job.
Yeah.
I took care of a lot of the staff in my office just as much as I took care of patients on the floor. But they were calling me Pastor Catina in the hospital. And I was like, y'all stop, Chase Chaplain Catina. She was like, girl, you are a pastor.
It
I was like,
is what it is.
it was what it was, as much as I didn't want to hear it, I didn't want to accept that, but I sat in my office one day and I was like, I really am pastoring these people. I'm writing sermons every week. We were having chapel service every week, and the chapel service was filling up inside of the hospital because we actually had space enough to where, on every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, we had chapel service right there in that chapel. And people were not just coming from their lunch break and off of the floors. There had been people even kind of coming from the community who had kind of heard, Southern Hills has a new chaplain over there, and we're going to go check out the service. So,
Katina,
but
stop. Wait a
yeah,
minute.
I mean, when I talk about it now, I don't even know how many times I probably said that out loud, but
But that's
yeah.
amazing to me because your stage kept getting bigger and bigger. And you probably weren't even realizing it, because you were just operating in your gift.
Yeah,
You were just
wasn't.
pouring out. Now I'm wondering how the associate pastor of congregational care, right? What does your own care routine look like that helps you to upkeep Katina in order to keep showing up in these spaces?
Well, that's an excellent question, and let me tell you, most times I do pretty well with that, but then there are times where I'm a little bit off track, and I can always tell when I'm off track with that because I become a little bitter, because I've poured out and poured out, and I'm pouring really from an empty cup.
Yeah.
But I also recognize I'm not as effective
Wow.
Again, because I'm operating in my own strength and not, God's strength.
Yeah.
So most times though, I do keep a pretty good tab on my own self-care because I do recognize that if I don't care for myself, I cannot care for God's people, and certainly that means rest. So I do, try to get to bed at a pretty decent hour, and if my
You was
husband
doing
was
that before you
yeah,
had
yeah,
any
yeah,
titles.
definitely. Definitely. But, I would at least, be able to stay up and see the news, Jaquita. I never see the 10 o'clock news anymore, so my husband is
Ooh-wee.
like, "Baby, you say you go to sleep about 9 or 9:30." He said, "Sometimes it's about 8 or 8:30 when you are
So
falling asleep."
funny.
But I'm up early, right? So
Yeah.
another one of my,
You catch
self-care
the early morning
routines
news, Katina.
I have to catch I catch it at 7, but, I work out, at least 3 times a week, at least 3 times a week. So I
Yeah.
I exercise, I make sure I take care of that because that gives me fuel, that allows me to clear my head. One of the other things that I do for self-care, of course, spiritually, is my devotional. I'm gonna do a devotional, at least, once or twice a day. I'm always just trying to, hear what the Lord is saying or speaking to me in through that devotional, through His Word, or in this season for my life, or maybe even for God's people. So I have to make sure I take care of myself spiritually, and then of course I'm going to add a little, the things that I really enjoy as far as massage or
Oh,
travel and things of that
yeah.
nature. But baking. I've also learned that baking is one of my self care activities. It is very therapeutic for me.
What do you mean when you say banking?
Baking, like
Baking. Oh, you've
baking.
always baked.
So,
Okay.
uh,
Katina, I make a good pound cake now, Katina. Next time I
not a
see
good come
you,
on, pound
I'ma
cake.
bring
Come
you a
on,
good one of
pound
my
cake.
pound cake,
Okay,
girl.
I'll be
I'm
ready
becoming
for a
a pound
slice.
cake lady.
Okay, okay. Do you do like a sour cream pound cake or 7 Up or
No, it's a like sweetened condensed milk and I don't want to give out all my secrets. I
your
got little
ingredient? Okay.
I'll tell you about it off air and everything like
Okay,
that. But yeah,
I
no.
see a little Quita Rose, pound cake shop in the
You
making.
know what? I'm gonna get me a little label and put me a little something out there.
I see the roses on your box, Quita Rose cakes.
Oh, come on, Katina. I might have to
Yeah,
say another yes.
yeah, see
I
there,
might have
you
to say
never
another
know.
yes. I love, Katina, that, you have allowed God, because I think what people don't realize is that it is not always easy to go from one stage to another in God.
Yeah,
It is not always easy to say yes when you're standing on one stage that you were shaking in your boots saying yes to that one. And then
yeah,
you just got comfortable there for God to pull you and say, now I want to put you here.
I'm moving
And
you again.
you have so gracefully gone through your seasons of elevation. Um, and I really appreciate that about your story and about the way that you're telling it. I'm wondering because we're thinking through kind of our act one, our intermission, and now as you've just been kind of walking through your reinvention, how you've allowed God to reinvent you. You have literally, the imagery is so strong that you really just allowed God to put you in the potter's hand and said, "Make me into something new." I'm willing to be made new in your hand. I think that there are so many people out there who are wondering how they're going to say yes to what they feel God calling them to, and knowing that they're going to have to submit to the making, to the forging, to the fire, to the all of the processes that come with being in the hand of God and allowing Him to mold you into something new. I'm wondering what words of inspiration, encouragement for people who are waiting to step into their second act. What can you give them in this moment?
Mhm. The one thing, the Bible tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear. but of love, power, and a sound mind. That does not mean that everything that God calls us to, that is going to be absent of having that feeling of fear. But you just have to talk that fear down and call it out, to be call it out to be what it is. And then ask God to again allow his power, his love, and the sound mind that he has given to you to completely override and overcome what is showing up as fear. Because, and here's the thing, as much as, you know, fear can be a healthy thing to, or let me say that feeling of fear can be healthy because it lets you know again that you're not putting all of your trust in you. You are trusting now, God, you know what? I don't feel really equipped for this. So, God, I'm getting ready to call on the strength that I know that you have because greater is He that's in me than He that is in the world. And so, God, I'm calling upon you to do the things in me that I cannot do for myself. So I would just say to anybody who God is trusting with the bigger things, and trusting you to do the greater things than that you've ever felt like you could do, trust God. Trust God. God will never ever call us to anything that He has not already prepared and equipped us for. The Word of God tells us that. Those whom He's called, He's already equipped. He's already justified. He's also qualified us. And so we just have to be willing to walk it out and to trust that God is going to take us not just part of the way, but all of the way.
Yeah, Catina, that's so good. Anything else that we can talk about with your journey here today?
You know, I think we've covered it all, because I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
God has been just so faithful. And even to the point now when, I was called for the role, I was called back from Chattanooga to come back to Nashville to the church, that I had attended, Mount Zion, before I left. And the thing about it, so crazy, I was only in Chattanooga for 18 months. My plan was to stay at least 3 years, and this role opened up, and I was like, no, God, how in the world am I getting ready to go back and be there? Well, at that particular time, when I accepted the position, it was not for the associate pastor of congregational care. It was for the executive director role. I probably would not have accepted the role had it said associate pastor because I probably would have said, God, I'm not ready for that. I don't think I can do
We've
that. But
talked about that P word.
as God would have it,
My
I had
Lord.
already accepted the position. And then the title
Change.
change came probably within the first 3 months. And I'm in that thing now, right? I'm getting ready to get married in like 7 months, and,
Ain't
there's
it
no way
smart?
that I can back up out of this, right? So, I had already accepted a job, and God said, "I know this little knucklehead child of mine is not gonna accept this job if it's got the associate pastor title attached to it. Let me go ahead and get her in here, and then I will allow the role that I have already
Oh,
assigned to
I'm
her,
sorry.
the
That
title
hit
that
me.
I have already assigned to
Oh
her,
my God.
it's gonna be a sign, and so, of course, on my door, that's exactly what it says, and so I'm having to continue to, embrace, and so that would be one of the other things that I would share with people who, God is calling to greater responsibility and, a greater anointing, a greater calling. You're not gonna always be ready for it. But God says if all He needs for you to do is to say yes, He continues to shape you and make you and mold you into whom He would have you to be,
Yeah.
even as you say yes. So you don't have to always be 100% ready. God gets you ready as you go.
And it's so funny because you may not have felt ready for it, but the Lord put you in the position before He gave you the title. And I think
Mhm.
that's key. You were already doing the work. He just transformed the way that you do it, the breadth of it. He widened the scope of
Yeah.
it. Um,
Enlarge my tent. Yeah.
and listen, people, we pray these prayers so casually, but God is so serious in this hour. The Bible talks about how, your young men and your daughters will prophesy. and how there is a generation coming that I believe God is raising people up.
Mhm.
He is raising up those that will lead the next generation into one of the most glorious seasons the church has ever seen.
Yeah.
Right. There are people coming, and there are people who have been lying in wait, who are gonna go through journeys similar to what Katina talked about today. They're gonna go through journeys of, I was working in insurance and the Lord called me. I was teaching in the public schools and the Lord called me. And right now, what we see in a lot of different areas, it looks like a great resignation. It looks like people are leaving these fields. But I believe that God has territories and He has purpose-filled assignments that we're about to step into.
Mhm.
And there has to be people like Katina in place to take care of those people who are coming, because they are going to be ready to move in the yes of God. They're going to be ready to prophesy. They're going to be ready to preach. They're going to be ready to pray. They're going to be ready to get out there, because they're going to be finding God with that enthusiasm that a lot of us in the church have lost. They're going to be coming in with that zeal that a lot of us who have been here for a long time, we've slowed down in. But I don't know where everybody who's listening to this podcast today, I don't know where you find yourself at on your journey, but this is the season to begin to get in place, because whether you are a person that's going to be on the wall and you're going to have to call out to the people to keep the people of God safe, or whether you're going to be the person that's going to be counseling the people, or whether you're going to be the person caring for the people or preaching to the people, whatever your thing is, the body is coming together. And not just the
Yeah.
people that we've known, but the people that we haven't seen yet. And I just think that the work, Katina, that you've done since I've known you, I did not know pre-call Katina. You know, I met Katina as she was moving forward into what God was calling her to do. So that's the only Katina I've ever known.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that even in my own life, in times where I doubted myself, in times where I didn't want to acknowledge a call or acknowledge who I really was, that it was the love and care that poured out of you as a servant of God, as a minister of God, and as a big sister, that allowed me the opportunity to believe that I could actually be everything that God was calling me to be in that season. So
Mhm.
I thank you for who you've been in my life. And I
Thank you for
know
saying
that
that.
there are some thousands of lucky congregants at Mount Zion who are so grateful for your service and grateful for your yes. I know everybody that knows you and is around you knows you to be a gem of a person, as you've always been. And I want you to know that just like I prayed for you back then, I'm going to be praying my sister through, and I'm still interceding and praying on your behalf, because the work and the impact of your life is really so significant in the body of Christ and in the lives of the people.
I appreciate that, Jaquita. I really, really do. Thank you so much for your intercession just over the years. We're 13 years in
My
now.
Lord,
And so
13
I
years.
know, Lord, look how far the Lord has brought us.
Look at
And
what the Lord has
yeah,
done.
you have been a blessing to my life for sure. And so
Oh,
I appreciate you guys allowing me to be able to share just a little bit about my journey with God, just in this calling and this journey that He has had me on. And so I just pray that what I've shared tonight will be a blessing to many, and that people will step out onto the face of the deep and trust God to take them higher.
yes. Listen, y'all, if you have not yet, I hope that you guys watch this whole thing, because this was absolutely amazing. If you hadn't have not yet, please like, please share, please subscribe. If you're new to the community, please say hello. We love interacting and engaging with you in the comments. Y'all, you have had the privilege of hearing the story of none other than Pastor Katina Parrish-Clark, right? And so I want you guys to continue to move with us. We're going to continue to engage in these stories as God would have us to do. But for tonight, I want to let you know, you do not have to stay stuck in your intermission. You can raise the curtain and step into your second act. Bye, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Night.